get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, all right? And we're going to stand up, and then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down, all right? And on the way up, we're going to take your other kneecap, and we're going to get up, and then it's going to take 3 shots to get us down.
Hey, Kneecaps Nation. It's a Detroit Lions winner here on Kneecaps for Breakfast. Vince Progard, that's me. Happy to be joined, as always, by my longtime partner in crime, Phil Byrne. And Phil, let's take all context and premonitions and everything like that aside. For the average football fan, that was fun to watch against the Bears over the weekend, wasn't it?
Fun to watch. My goodness, like that is underselling what we saw, Vince Sprogar.
Yeah.
That was the genius coming back to get a taste of his own medicine.
Yeah.
If we have any Ted Lasso fans out there, our Dan Campbell was Ted Lasso, and Ben Johnson was Nate, who of course coached a rival team and kind of had it handed to him over the course of the show. So what a way to open things up for that home crowd.
And it felt like it was possibly going to be a dead fan base almost. If you were to see it go in the other direction, I mean, you're going to start to see a lot of people start to slowly jump off board the arc, with the way the season ended, the way the season started last week. And then if they were to have something totally the opposite as to what we saw on Sunday, that would have really changed a lot of people's attitudes substantially. It was the exact opposite, though, against the Bears. And I think what we saw really did a lot to sort of reignite the passion within the fan base. Maybe a little bit too artificially so. We'll get to that later on in this episode. But definitely what the doctor ordered after a lot of things that hadn't gone our way for quite some time.
Yeah, so put a brief pause on that. If you followed this for a while, you knew also something else was on the way. It wasn't just a Lions win.
Fall, right? Fall's on its way.
Is it? I mean, it's like 80 degrees
Fair
out
enough.
there, man. No, of course
nice.
not. Congratulations, Vince. Congratulations, Cassie. You are now the proud mom and dad of a newborn. What has this week been like? How's the young one doing? Walk us through that experience before we dive into the Lions here.
Yeah, first of all, thanks very much, Phil. I appreciate the kind words and well wishes all throughout, and everybody's support and well wishes and meals and gifts and offerings, and it's just more than I can quantify and put into words. So thank you to everybody from the bottom of our hearts for that. But it's just amazing. By the time that you get this episode dropped to your devices, it's going to be Tuesday morning, and it was last Tuesday morning that our little guy showed up. So just the fact that, we've got an entire week of parenthood under our belts is just a surreal. Everything's been a surreal experience, to be honest with you. The fact that we went from having, nothing at all and just having being, the dinks, the dual income, no kids with a dog in the mix, and then you're thrust right into parenthood just like that. It's just absolutely amazing. What they say is true about the sleep deprivation being a thing. There's no beating around the bush on that front. I haven't gotten much sleep. I think I've been on complete adrenaline since probably Monday of last week. So I don't think I've fully crashed yet, which probably isn't a good thing because I'm sure it's going to come hard and suddenly. But no, it's been great. Mom's doing great. Baby Henry's doing great. Perry, the older four-legged furry brother's doing great. So what more can you ask for?
Oh, that's fantastic. So to transition, Vince, I only know one way, right?
Yeah.
You see this game. We know what your prediction was before the season. Did you have to kind of like pinch yourself as this game is going on and say, am I this sleep deprived, or are the Lions just completely opening up a can of, for lack of a better term, whoop ass on the Chicago Bears?
It sure wasn't what I was expecting. And I think what concerned me the most was going to be, is Ben Johnson going to have this date circled on his personal calendar from the day he stepped up and hopped on that plane with his family in tow, headed to the Windy City to get to that 3 o'clock press conference way back in
Yeah.
January? I mean, to a man, anybody had to have known that this game held more significance than pretty much any other one on the schedule for Ben Johnson. This is going to be what he got his guys prepared for in the offseason conditioning, in the nutritional seminars, in the joint practices, in the preseason games, in training camp, in just little group text messages to his team trying to hype the guys up. It was kind of going to be the culmination of this game against the Lions to prove to everybody that, yeah, I'm the mastermind behind what the Lions have been doing. They haven't done anything remotely close to what the Lions have done the last few years. What's the common denominator? Me, Ben Johnson. You get me out of the mix, they're not going to be as good. This is why the Bears were wise to hire me, of all people, as their head coach. Don't forget, Phil, the Bears have had a revolving door of head coaches over the years. They've tried like hell to get it right, and
Hmm.
for one reason or another, whether it's the quarterback or whether it's the head coach, you can kind of do the chicken or the egg discussion there, but bottom line, it hasn't worked. And some of the bizarre, some of the hires have been more bizarre, some of the hires have been more reputable, but it hasn't worked. So Ben Johnson is on a mission to prove that he is the guy to get the Bears back to where they were 40 years ago. And instead of doing it with a vaunted defense, they're going to go out and do it with an offense that's going to be respected among those in league circles. You didn't see that. You saw the exact
No.
opposite. You saw that the Lions almost had a personal thing of their own to say, hey, Ben Johnson, you had the audacity to not only take a head coaching job and leave your boys, but to take a head coaching job and better your career in division against the probably the biggest rival out of any of the other ones, the Chicago Bears. So guess what? Here's what we've got coming to you. Enjoy, Ben. Enjoy 0-2 and trying to figure out what the hell did I get myself into.
Yeah, it was definitely a way to for him to, you know, have his cake and eat it too with what the beatdown ensued. I felt a little better going into this game. Obviously with the Bears being 0-1, but how poorly Caleb Williams played in the second half. I already had a lot of doubts about him as the Chicago Bears quarterback going into this season. Um, to me, I think they do have a lot of talent on that team, a lot of young, untapped potential talent. I think the Lions in this game prove that, hey, they may not be on that top 2 or 3 elite pedestal, that maybe we once thought they were. But they are here in the now. They've got most of their guys in their prime. They're not a year or 2 or even 3 away. They're here to win now. They were still, if not, picking Green Bay, the favorite to win the NFC North. Um, I have a ton of questions about Caleb Williams. I don't think this is going to be a good relationship that he's got with Ben Johnson. We'll have to see where, that looks at the tail end of the season. We get them at, the very last game. But it looks a little toxic right now, to be honest. And there were reports coming out of Chicago that Ben had been a little tough on Caleb, but there was that fourth down play where he got stuffed, and it was a just terrific showing by the Lions D line. Without a Lee McNeil,
Fourth on a
and
hot dog.
yeah,
You're
and
not
doing
talking a big yard. It's fourth on a hot dog.
and he couldn't get it. And Ben Johnson looked absolutely livid that this quarterback, who's already had a little bit of a, reputation for being, I don't
Prima
want to say
donna.
self-serving, but a little prima donna, a little ego-driven, wasn't tough enough to go get that yard. Say what you will about Jared Goff, he's pretty tough as nails. Like he will kind of keep fighting out there, even if he's not 100%. So, hey, sometimes the grass is not always greener. And man, it's good to be a Detroit Lions fan after a game like that.
I've got a lot of bullet points that outlines the good that the Lions did. I have a lot of bullet points that outline some things that we should continue to proceed with caution despite what we saw in the game against the Bears. But before we do that, I want to dig a little deeper into this Caleb Williams discussion, Phil. And I don't value Jonathan Vilma as this beacon of excellence when it comes to being an analyst. I mean, St. Brown's rookie year, when he called a game with Kenny Albert, I kid you not, Phil, you probably don't remember it because I tend to listen into these things more than the average person does, but he called St. Brown in his rookie season Amon Brown St. Ra in one game. So, of course, he's going to follow that up by
Did,
referring to Brian Branch as
yeah,
Dion Branch for the
that's what I was gonna
majority of
say.
the
Yeah,
Lions
yeah,
broadcast. So, again,
yeah,
you got to take what he says with a grain of salt. However, there is one little story that stuck out to me, and that's how he broke down Caleb Williams with a basketball analogy. He said that Caleb Williams is by nature a shooting guard, but he wants to turn Caleb Williams, he being Ben Johnson, wants to turn Caleb Williams into a point guard. Not be the one to make the play, but be the one that facilitates the play taking place. Everything goes through you, and then you're empowering your playmakers around you, in which they have a glut of young and
yeah.
probably exciting playmakers around him with receivers and tight ends. They still have some work to do in their backfield, I think, but I think they're definitely on the way to putting a lot of playmakers around him. So, of course, it would stand to reason, you know, be the point guard, not the shooting guard. I thought that was a interesting analogy in that you have almost a philosophical clash between head coach and primary play caller and the quarterback, rookie head coach, second year quarterback, and it seems like they both have very differing ethos of how they foresee the other essentially taking the reins here. So something to keep an eye on, Phil, and that Ben Johnson wants Caleb Williams to do less and facilitate more, and Caleb Williams is on record as saying he wants to be the guy.
Yeah, interesting. Kind of a be Isaiah Thomas, not Michael Jordan kind of approach with how he needs to facilitate, how he needs to lead. Again, nothing that there was nothing wrong with the way that Michael Jordan led or anything like that, but it shouldn't all fall on Caleb Williams for what the Bears are trying to do. I think the other thing is like I think I'd like DeAndre Swift, but they also did use what a top 10 pick on Colston Loveland.
Yep.
And yet it's Tyler Warren, who was picked several picks later with the Indianapolis Colts, is having a phenomenal rookie season. Colston Loveland, I saw him in a couple snaps, but he did not really do much, even though I think, most people that listen to this podcast know how talented he is. Roma Dunze, from the year before, he was the primary recipient of most of Caleb Williams. But Luther Burden was another pick that they used. So as they got some of these picks for receivers for Caleb Williams to throw to, they didn't get one of those talented young running backs that we saw come out in the draft with some of the rookies. We know Ashton Genty went off the board before they would have picked, but there are a handful of guys that probably would have made some sense for Chicago to complement DeAndre Swift.
Heck, Omari Hampton was on the board, and they took Colston
Yeah,
Loveland.
yeah. So that's the way they do it. I just know that when our offense was best under Ben Johnson, if he's trying to replicate what he had here, it was when he had two really good running backs that were a great complement to each other. And I think just having DeAndre Swift as your primary guy, he can do a lot of things out there. Maybe isn't the best approach to go ahead and try to um, I hate to say even save Caleb Williams at this point, but things aren't looking good. Again, not our quarterback, not our problem, but
Right. Yeah, and this isn't a
it's pretty
Bears
apparent.
podcast,
Yeah,
but it is
yeah,
a team that we're going to be doing business with for
right,
years to come, So it does pay to at least have the discussion. And to be fair, the Bears did invest a seventh round pick in Michigan State football killer Kyle Monangai out of Rutgers. I think
right.
every good game he's ever had was against Michigan
Yeah,
State, so they
yeah,
used a seventh round pick on him. And we'll just have to see if things finally start to click there in Chicago with what Ben Johnson is laying down. But nonetheless, they fall to 0-2. So let's get to the good, Phil. I want to ride this wave of positivity and start to get into some of the good stuff that we saw. And again, we'll kind of worry about context afterwards. But 511 yards of offense.
yep,
So phenomenal. They hung half 100 on the Bears, which again we saw on a couple of different occasions last year. So we knew that the potential was there. We just didn't know if they were able to tap into that potential with Ben Johnson being out of the room. 5 passing touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns, one for Gibbs, one for Montgomery. The Lions do not lose. Literally, they do not lose when both of them get into the rushing touchdown category. This was the first time in franchise history the Lions had over 500 yards of offense, 5 passing touchdowns, and 2 rushing touchdowns. So that's excellent right there. The Lions averaged 8.8 yards per play against the Bears on Sunday. That's a franchise record. And Jared Goff had just about as reliable of a day as you could possibly have. He finished the
Yeah.
game completing his last 17 passes that he threw. He threw for over 300 yards, 5 touchdowns, no mistakes, wasn't sacked. The pass protection was better, and he was completing passes to the left. He was completing passes to the right. He was completing passes down the middle, and he was getting the long ball going as well. I think I saw something on Next Gen Stats that said that Jared Goff had 230 yards passing on throws collectively that took longer than 3 seconds to put together. So he wasn't just doing a dump off and letting
Yeah.
his receivers make the play with their legs. That means you're talking throws that actually had air yards associated with them. So you were seeing a little bit of everything. You were seeing the passing game going, you were seeing the running game going. So a lot to like with what we saw offensively against the Bears.
Yeah. And then we had 7 plays that went 20 or more yards. So you talk the explosives in that as well. I think we can give you, stats till we're blue in the face, but gone too far here. I think without giving some praise to Hank Fraley, the Lions offensive line coach, and working with Dan Campbell and working with Johnny Morton to try to go ahead and get that offensive line situated. I think we talked at length last week about how poor it was, how exposed they look, how they had Jared Goff on skates because they couldn't figure out where Parsons was coming from, where Gary was coming from, some of the other pass rushers that the Packers had. And hey, maybe the Packers are this elite team, and that loss wasn't as bad as we thought. Um, Maybe the Bears are a bottom 3 team in the NFL. You wouldn't think, talent wise, that they would be that bad. But what a sign of improvement. Jared Goff looked comfortable, and just the bad taste that I personally have in my mouth seeing the Lions in our home uniforms at Ford Field, back in January, that loss to the Commanders. Um, this was the absolute perfect medicine for all of our ails as Lions fans kind of moving forward. Gives us hope, gives us optimism. Was it the perfect game? No, but my goodness, this is like an A minus to an A. I won't say an A plus, but it
No.
was
And I'm going
up
to tell
there.
you why it's not an A plus here in just a second. But to the average Joe, it
Yeah.
almost kind of seemed like the Aaron Rodgers RELAX experience from a few years back. They hit a little bit of rough water early in the season, and he said, "Hey, don't worry about it. Everything's going to be fine." And they sure as you know what came right out, and everything was right the very next week. So
Hmm.
yeah, that's so that left a good taste in our mouths as Lions fans. But as it's my job as the ever
Boom, ba boom.
yeah, the shoe has to drop on the other the other shoe has to
Foot.
drop there. So that's my job. So a few things concern me about this game, and it's simply a matter of the Bears not being a good enough team to hold the Lions accountable for these. And again, admittedly, I expected more from the Bears. I expected them to play more to how they were on paper. So I will gladly admit my mistake in having faith in the Bears in this particular spot. But a few things, again, did concern me. Number one, if you think about it, the Lions really could not generate much of a pass rush until the game was well in hand and the Bears were in obvious passing situations in the second half. So the Lions officially finished with 4 sacks on Caleb Williams. But early in the game, when there was more of a script in place by the Bears, and again, one thing that the Bears proved over week 1 against the Vikings and week 2 against the Lions is that Ben Johnson has them following a script, those first 10, 15 plays amazingly. It's just once you get past that where things have really started to be more of a teacups at Disney World experience. But anyway, the Lions, especially early on when they were on script, and even as the first half continued, the Lions really could not do much of anything to rattle Caleb Williams. It wasn't until the game was out of hand where you almost wonder if the mental resolve was still there when you see the game getting further and further out of hand, that the guys weren't blocking as well, and Williams may not have been, I'm not saying he was dogging it out there, but maybe not hustling his best out there. So that's one thing that you've got to take a look at and say, hey, yeah, they got 6 sacks. Yeah, they got to the quarterback more, but it was in the second half when the game was decided, when the passing situations were going to be more clear and obvious. The other thing that kind of irked me a little bit was that the Lions did a great job forcing those 2 turnovers in the second half, the fumble recovery and the interception. What did the Lions do immediately after those turnovers? Nothing. So part of what you need to do is you need to kind of instill that double whammy, force the turnover, and then go ahead and score points off those turnovers. They could not do that in either scenario. Let's not forget also that the Lions were gifted a touchdown at the end of the half. So the Tesla catch, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful catch. But if you go back and look, he had knee, foot, butt cheek all down at the same time in bounds, and then he rolled out of bounds. The officials said that the clock should have been stopped, gave the Lions enough time to run one more play to try and punch the ball in. They did just that, so that kind of added some more separation to the lead at the end of halftime, and I'm sure that couldn't have been good for the Bears' psyche, to where it's almost like, who cares at this point? So a few things there kind of were like, okay, you can look at it from the other side of things. So I guess my question to you, Phil, is what message calls out to you the most loud and clear? That the Lions went out and hung 100 plus on the Bears. Their offense looked like we were in 2024 form all over again, or that the Lions were absolutely dump trucked in week 1 by the Bears. They were the aggressor in every possible category, and you can't unsee what you saw in week 1. Which of those 2 messages calls out to you the loudest?
I'm still going to go from what I saw on Sunday. I think part of this is knowing for the last couple of seasons, while we have not had starters play in the preseason, there has been a tremendous amount of rust. I think the unfamiliarity potentially with play calling, offensively and defensively, set us back in that game in Green Bay. And to me, yes, in my opinion, the Bears, potentially the way things are going, could end up with the top 3 pick next year. Things do not look good. They're in the hardest division in football. They're going to get a lot of L's this season. I think Caleb Williams, I think I saw a stat, has lost his last 11 or 12 starts. So, I mean, things are mounting for them. The thing that I take resounding, though, was that pass rush not counted, opportunities off turnovers not counted. I saw enough from the offensive line. That's the protection scheme that I need to see a little bit more. It will be more challenging as we see, some more pass rushers in the league of, Micah Parsons. We've got the Steelers on schedule. We've got the Ravens coming up. A lot of these teams are going to have some really good pass rushers that we're going to see. That pressure up the middle though looked so poor in week 1 that is how I want to go ahead and take this, stats and everything like that moving forward. Because I think right now the Packers are probably the best team in football.
So, in a large sense, we are kind of where we were a year ago or even in 2023. And what I mean by that is the Lions have proven that most every occasion over the last handful of seasons, week in, week out, the Lions do a fantastic job of beating up heavily on significantly inferior competition.
Yeah.
You can't expect something like that from teams that are on your level or beyond, as we saw against the Bills a season ago, from the Commanders, for the 49ers in the playoffs a couple of years back. So
Mhm.
I think what calls out to me a little bit here, Phil, is that the Packers are significantly better than we thought they would be. And I don't think Micah Parsons was the one thing that just flipped a switch and said, okay, the Packers went from being mediocre at best to being a Super Bowl contender. I think the Packers kind of had things going a little bit at first, and Parsons was just that extra piece of the puzzle. I think the Packers are better than what everybody originally gave them credit for. And conversely, I think the Bears are in a much worse situation than I admittedly thought. And I think they're going to be experiencing a lot more growing pains than what I'm sure anybody was on the understanding that was going to
Yeah.
be the case. So, where we find ourselves, Phil, is familiar territory of, okay, now we're going into, again, we're going into a team that is just as good and realistically better than the Lions. The Lions are playing at
Yeah.
Baltimore coming up week 3 on Monday Night Football.
Yep.
The Lions have not won in Baltimore in their current iteration as the Baltimore Ravens. You
Eh.
have to go back to the Baltimore Colts days to when
Oh
the
boy.
Lions won in the city by the Inner Harbor. So, keeping that in mind and knowing that the Ravens embarked upon a instant classic against the Buffalo Bills week 1 on Sunday Night Football, that after a slightly slow start, they went out and just absolutely beat the Cleveland Browns over the head with a 2x4 repeatedly for the ensuing 30 minutes of football. So it's going to be very difficult in that the Ravens have a running game, they have a passing game, they have a
Yeah.
mobile quarterback that can do just about anything to keep a play alive and keep a play positive for his team. They have defense. They're at home where they're especially tough, and the Lions haven't had a ability to be able to win there against the Ravens over the years. So, keeping in mind what we saw week 1, what we saw week 2, how does this game on Monday Night Football against an AFC contender in the Ravens, how does this game shake out in your mind?
Yeah. I think the Ravens are the toughest matchup for this team in the entire NFL. I think they have the arguably deepest roster. I think Philadelphia might have better receivers still than Baltimore. But that running game that they added with Derrick Henry to give Lamar a little bit more help in that backfield, the lines that they have, the secondary that they have, you know, John Harbaugh is obviously a great coach too. These are the things that are going to present a lot of challenges. And again, once again, this is not the Ravens at Ford Field. This is, the Ravens in Baltimore. So decidedly, I'm hoping that we look a little bit more like what we saw on Sunday as far as scheming, game planning, and preparation, and not so much week 1. But I still think we're going to struggle in this game. And I'm just hopeful that I saw the news today, or when you're listening to this, it would have been on Monday, that Joe Burrow is going to be out an extended period of time. Not that I want to look ahead, but this is kind of what we're doing. Um, I will gladly take the win and mark it as a once in 30-year event if we were able to beat the Ravens in Baltimore. That is no easy feat. I think they are the odds-on favorite that I would pick right now if I had to pick a Super Bowl team, even over the Packers right now. So this is going to be very, very challenging. I just don't think we match up well with them. And I think they're going to provide a lot of pressure for Jared Goff. Um, we'll have to see. I think Kyle Van Noy might be out for them, former Lion, for a cup of coffee. But yeah,
We did draft him, so there's that.
no.
But Yeah, it is a tough matchup, Phil, and it comes down to a situation that we've talked about numerous times over the course of the last several off seasons, if you will, that the Lions are not well equipped to slow down a mobile quarterback.
Yeah.
And you've got mobile quarterbacks. You could even consider Caleb Williams to be more of a mobile guy than a pocket guy. And I think Ben Johnson ultimately wants Williams to be more of a pocket guy. But
Yeah.
you've got Lamar Jackson coming up here, who's about as good as it gets. He's a
Yeah.
multiple time MVP, and the Lions just don't have what it takes on defense to be able to do much to slow him down. Let's not forget the Lions went out and played the Ravens a couple of years back, right when the Lions were just getting going and the times were good and they were beating people left and right and overtaking the other team's stadiums and this and that. And the Lions went out and lost 44-6. So I think, given the fact that what we saw against the Bears is a little inflated because the Bears are worse than we think, and they went out and struggled so much on the road against a team that is tracking to be just as good or better than the Lions, it
Hmm.
wouldn't surprise me if this one actually gets kind of ugly. And I think I would feel better if we wind up seeing a game that winds up being like a 34-24 or something like
Yeah.
that, to where the Lions are actually able to hold their own. Because let's be honest, in pretty much every prognostication scenario, I don't think very many people have the Lions going out and pulling off the
No.
upset. So if I can see that the Lions can do enough to hold their own against a team that, in my mind, is better than the Lions, that's at least going to give me a little bit more motivation to be excited heading into a winnable game against Cleveland in week 4. You talked about the Joe Burrow injury. They're going to be coming up in week 5. Kansas City, we'll get to them in a few minutes. Week 6. You're feeling a little bit better knowing that the Lions were able to hold their own against a good, solid opponent like Baltimore, as opposed to going out and getting
Yeah.
absolutely shipwrecked like they were in the matchup against the Ravens 2 years ago. We'll see. What I do want to get to, though, Phil, and you were very, very prophetic in going down this road, is some of the injuries and situations with some of the other teams. So you mentioned Joe Burrow going to be
Yeah.
out with a turf toe injury. It's going to be a 3-month process for him. We will not see him
Yep.
for the game against the Bengals week 5. So it's looking like it's going to be the Jake Browning experience for them. Now, they still have those playmakers with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and a solid, not great, but solid offensive line. But we said when we did our schedule prediction a couple weeks back that that was a winnable game, and it's a matter of not when you play, but when you play them. So if the Bengals are going into that game a little bit shorthanded, you're coming off a win possibly against Cleveland. Maybe you're catching them at a good place. So that's an injury to keep in mind as well. The Vikings, they are 1-1 on the young season after taking one on the chin to the Falcons at home on Sunday Night Football. And after putting in a comeback effort against the Bears week 1 on Monday Night Football, came out today that J.J. McCarthy is going to be out a couple of weeks, maybe even a month, depending on how his injury heals up. He's got himself a sprained ankle, and it looks like Jaden Daniels for the Commanders is going to be dealing with a sprained knee, may or may not miss any time. But of course, so much of his game comes with his ability to be a running quarterback. We won't see him quite as soon. We won't see him till November, but those are 3 quarterbacks that are on the Lions schedule between now and Veterans Day, to where, hey, injuries can hit other teams, Phil, not just us.
It's nice to, at least at this point, feel relatively healthy. I will say there was a point in the game where, Marcus Davenport, I think, got hurt twice. And just like, oh, here we go again.
Yeah.
We're due for another Marcus Davenport injury, but he was able to, from what I could tell, kind of finish the game. Even though we started to get some backups kind of playing a little bit, the last few minutes of the game. But hey, who knows? We're talking about the Cincinnati Bengals. I brought this up to someone today at work. Who's to say we don't go to Cincinnati? We beat Cincinnati, and then we take Trey Hendrickson. We'll put a bounty and say like, hey, you know what? We'll take him for the rest of the year, guys.
Well, let's be
You're not
honest. I
doing
mean,
anything.
all they did was just give him more money. There was no contract
Yeah,
extension. So
yeah.
obviously he's going to want a contract extension, but hey, the Lions are handing out money left and right. So it's just money, right? What's the point? It's all stuff that's printed in the basement of Rod Wood's sleeping quarters. So it's all good. Nothing to worry about. I guess the last point I want to make, Phil, before we get to our game picks for the
Yeah.
week 3 matchups,
Hmm.
is what in God's name were the Lions doing keeping their starters in there when the game was well in hand? I mean, I understand that you don't take your foot off the gas, and I don't think they should have did it for Ben Johnson because he of all people should know that's what they do. So why would he be entitled to special treatment? But at the same time, get your starters out of there in the fourth quarter. Why is St. Brown catching touchdowns? Why is Marcus Davenport still out there to where he could get hurt again? Just use your head, guys.
Who had a bet on an Isaac Tesla anytime touchdown and only saw him catch the ball one time? This guy.
Uh-huh.
So,
Uh-huh.
yeah, it would have been nice to see guys like that play a little bit more. The game was pretty much well decided. There's still some guys that could have got some good reps, late in the game if they would have seen the field. I don't know, maybe they didn't get the reps in practice or something like that. Again, the game script and who you get in is rotation is going to be a little different in the regular season than preseason for sure. But yeah, the last thing that you would want would be an injury that late in the game.
You're listening to this episode of Kneecaps for Breakfast. Vince Progar and Phil Byrne. Glad to be with you as we break down the Lions' 52-21 victory over the Chicago Bears. And the stats are staggering, Phil. Like we kind of alluded to on last week's episode, that fine line between 2-0, 1-1, and 0-2 through the first 2 weeks of the season, and how much just those first 2 games chart the path of what you're going to be on the rest of the season. So the teams that go 2-0 are at about a 80% chance of going to the playoffs. So that's pretty good. If you could tell me I'd have 80% odds at anything, that's something I'm feeling pretty good about. On
Yep.
the flip side, it's just less than a coin flip, 43% to be exact for teams that go 1-1. So that's where the Lions are. So yeah, about coin flip or just a little bit less that they'll make the playoffs. And the teams that go 0-2, it drops all the way down to 12%. So it is highly unlikely that teams that go 0-2 are going to wind up making the playoffs, even though there are still 15 games left on the schedule. It's still a much better situation for the Lions that they were able to get right against a divisional opponent at home, get some good feelings going, and head into I hate to call it critical, being only week 3, but a very important week 3 Monday night contest against the Ravens. Let's get into some picks, Phil. We will start off with our Thursday night football contest. The Miami Dolphins are catching 12.5 points as they travel to Buffalo to take on the Buffalo Bills. And Phil, we can talk about Buffalo until we're black and blue in the face, but I want to take another angle at this before we make the pick. What in God's name has happened with the Miami Dolphins? It's almost like the trend of hiring these so-called geniuses to be the head coach is kind of backfiring in a pretty stark and snowballing fashion down there in South Beach.
Well, it's kind of like that. Tyreek Hill has had a lot of requests and demands to
And he just had
leave
another
them,
kid,
and
didn't
I think so, something like that. Hey, you're one to talk, Vince.
he? I know.
It's not a great situation. I feel like this is going to be an opportunity too, even though I think everyone's gonna pick the Bills to outright win the game. It is a big spread for an NFL game. For a team that I think beginning of the season you wouldn't think was in the category of like the New Orleans Saints to be like potentially picking number one overall, but Mike McDaniel looking like potentially he could be the first coach let go with how quickly that has gone south down in South Beach.
So make the pick, Phil. Are we talking the Dolphins
You know,
And the 12.5 points, or do you think the Bills are looking at another blowout?
I have no confidence in the Dolphins right now. Until told otherwise, or I see their offense show up, their defense show up. I'm always going to go with the other team. That is a crazy big line for the Buffalo Bills, but nobody's going to cover the spread like the Buffalo Bills. I'm taking the Bills.
And nobody circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills, as the great Chris
Hmm.
Berman has said numerous times. And it's a proven fact that Tua Tagovailoa cannot go on the road outdoors north of the Mason-Dixon line and go win a game. Give me the Bills to lay the points. Interesting one in the city of brotherly love, Phil, for Sunday. The LA Rams are making the coast to coast venture. They are getting 3.5 as they travel to take on the 2-0 Super Bowl champions. 2-0 versus 2-0, Phil. Who you like in this one?
To be honest, I kind of like what I've seen a little bit from the Rams so far, early on in the schedule. But I'm just going to go back to what I feel a little bit more comfortable about. I don't think the Eagles' offense has been explosive to this point. I don't think Saquon has had the big plays that he was getting at this point of the season last year. Um, but overall, I just feel confident with the Eagles. And anytime a West Coast team comes east, they always run into some issues. So I'm going to go ahead and take the Eagles in this one.
You might remember that the Rams were one of my sneaky picks to make some noise in the NFC this season, and I think this is one of those games to where they're going to be able to look back when it's all said and done and say, hey, this was an important one to have in our favor. I think the Rams are not only going to cover the 3.5, I think they win this game outright, and I think it's going to be a situation where you can only get the Eagles to tush push their way into wins when they have the lead and the ball with the necessity of being able to run clock out or to get those short yard situations. It's not really a big deal if they're looking up at the other team in the scoreboard. And let's not forget the Rams were one bad throw by Stafford away from winning that game in the playoffs that would have sent them to the NFC Championship game
Yeah.
back in January. It's one of those battle versus war scenarios. The Eagles will have wound up winning the war when it's all said and done because of that game. But I think the Rams are going to win the battle here. Give me them to not only cover, but win outright on the road at Philadelphia. Next game up, you have the Dallas Cowboys, fresh off their first win in the Brian Schottenheimer era in a, I gotta say, Phil, kind of an instant classic, if you will, between the Giants and the Cowboys. The Cowboys nonetheless picked up their first win. The Bears head home, trying to pick up the pieces after getting thumped against the Lions the other day. The Cowboys catching a 1.5 as they travel to Chicago to take on the Bears. Phil, your thoughts on this one?
Um, Remember the early part of the episode where I was talking how the Bears are spiraling? For some reason, I think they just have to win at some point. I still think Dallas is a little too one-dimensional in terms of their attack. They have an awesome passing attack. Defense, I just don't know how reliable it's going to be. I think a hard week of practice, I'm shocking myself by saying this, I guess, but I'll take the Bears, I guess.
I guess it's a good thing we're picking against the spread here because I don't know if I like either of these two
Yeah,
teams to actually go out there and win a football game. So I
yeah.
guess I could see a scenario where it's 17-16 or something like that, and somebody's got to win the game. So yeah, give me the Cowboys and the points, I guess, question mark. Last game up, and we'll again kind of go a little deeper into this one before we actually make the pick here. The Kansas City Chiefs laying 5.5 as they travel to the Meadowlands to take on the New York Giants. What I want to know first, Phil, before we make this pick is what's going on with the Chiefs. They're 0-2 for the first time since 2014. Patrick Mahomes was nowhere near being the quarterback for the Chiefs. It was Andy Reid's second year, and it just sort of seems like the whole rig is just kind of aging before our eyes, and we've seen the best days of the Kansas City Chiefs come and go, and this is kind of the rotting remains that we're seeing in front of us. What are your thoughts on this situation? And again, this is relevant to us as Lions
Yeah.
fans, Phil, because we're going to be seeing them in just a few short weeks coming up in week 6.
So, heard a stat today that Patrick Mahomes, through the 2 games, has over 100 rushing yards, which is not a good sign for a guy who should be in the pocket all the time. You don't want to have him running out and risking getting hurt. I don't think Kansas City has a running game. I think without Rashee Rice, they don't have a clear playmaker to go vertical in that offense. Travis Kelce is a uh, 2 tiers below what he was 3 years ago. The last couple of seasons, they have been led by their defense. Their defense has played pretty well so far, but not good enough to go ahead and get them the win. There are some issues there. So who knows? We might be playing the Kansas City Chiefs at just about the perfect time a little bit later on this season because they certainly look like they need quite a bit of help going forward.
So again, the Chiefs laying 5.5 at the Giants, who showed the ability to play defense in a close loss against the Commanders in week 1, and they showed the ability to go out there and score some points with Russell Wilson throwing the ball all over the yard in a close loss to the Cowboys week 2. How does this one shake out in your eyes?
Give me the New York Football Giants. Cam Scatterbo takes in the winning touchdown in the fourth quarter. Oh my gosh, the Kansas City Chiefs are going to be 0-3.
Could you believe that? And I don't know if I'm going to be as direct and specific as you with my scenario of how the game unfolds, but I do take the Giants and the points in this one. It's I don't know what to say about what I'm seeing in Kansas City here, and I know that the Giants need to start waking up eventually. And again, we saw it
Yeah.
happen on each side of the ball in week 1 and week 2. They just haven't been able to put it all together. I think on a Sunday night football stage that we're going to see coming up this weekend, I think the Giants are going to do just enough to keep this thing interesting. So the next time we talk, Phil, is going to be after the Lions and Ravens on Monday night, and we probably won't get to doing this pod to hit people's devices until probably hump day of next week. So a lot of football going to take place between now and then,
Yeah.
but we'll hope for a 2-1 record between now and then. Not feeling too optimistic, but hey, that's why you line up and play football for 60 minutes, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And is this game going to be the game that we remember at the end of the season? Probably not. But my goodness, for a Sunday afternoon, it felt damn good to be a Detroit Lions fan. And if you know any Chicago Bears fans in your life, just laugh in their face and say, "Hey, see you next year."
Amen, brother. All right, that's the story for us here on this episode of Kneecaps for Breakfast. It was a lot of fun breaking it down on the Lions' big win over the Bears with you. Next time, again, we talk to you will be after the Lions' Monday night game against the Ravens. Don't be missing out on that one for sure. For Phil Byrne across the way, Vince Progar saying good morning, go Lions, or down the field, over and out.